Okay, so I'm here with my buddy Joel, and he's got a motorcycle, Ninja 400, and it fell over in the winter. You can see here the handlebar just bent a little bit, so we're gonna pop that off and change it. This should hopefully be only a few minutes. Yeah, we'll just dive in and see how it goes. All right, so there's only a few things that we're gonna need to do. This here is so we've got a bolt here holding the handlebar on, one here holding it to the fork, and we've got the brake is gonna have to come off with these two bolts here. This is 5mm 5.5, 6mm here, and then we'll have a 6mm here inside of the handlebar. Then we should be able to pull this off, unscrew the throttle, pull everything out, put the new one on, and be good to go. So this one here might be a bit tough to get to with the handlebar being bent in the way. So we'll take here and do the bottom, the grip first. So these are pretty neat. They're on the end of your handlebars. They actually have some weight to them. So this is not just there to protect the handlebar when it falls over, but it's also there to try and damp out any tire vibrations you get. So there's heavy weights on the end of these. Typically, if you were turning this into a race bike, you'd take these away because you're just trying to get rid of all the weight you can, and you'd have a steering damper on there. But for street bikes, a little heavy weight on the end. And you can see the red on here, that is Loctite, and that just helps make sure with all the vibration from the bike that this isn't gonna go anywhere. Yeah, the throttle you can see is kind of binding, and that's likely just because the handlebar is bent. I think we'll check out the inside of there, but we should be good. I love this screwdriver. So all the bolts on here that look like they're Phillips aren't actually Phillips. They're Japanese industrial standard. So you'll see if you put this is a Japanese industrial standard screwdriver in there. It fits perfect. You probably noticed if you ever try and use a regular Phillips bit on any of these things that look like they're Phillips on your Japanese sport bikes, you just strip them out, and it's really frustrating. So this is pretty cheap. It's got all the Japanese industrial standard stuff, and it also comes with bits for the European standard Phillips type screws. I forget exactly what they're called, but if you build any IKEA furniture, again, the Phillips screws there. If you try and use a US Phillips screwdriver, you're gonna have a bad time. Whereas when you use this, things just kind of come out and go nicely. So you can see that grab this screw just fine. And you can use a Phillips screwdriver on these, but it's just, if you're in a pinch and you don't have a JAS screwdriver, it's just not as easy, and it's gonna probably damage the hardware a bit. We'll pop these out of the throttle, and then hopefully we've got enough space to just open this up. Loosening, I believe this is the throttle cable, yeah. Take the front off, back off. You can see this here, this is the reel that will actually actuate your throttle. I'm gonna mark these so that we remember exactly which side. So I'm just gonna mark this front one here. That way we know which one's which when we get it back out. And then you can just rotate up and out, and the whole throttle tube comes right off. So now that we've got that out, we should be able to access this here. Our 6mm. No, that came out. We'll figure out where that goes. Put it back together. So we've got a 6mm here. There we go. And now we're loose. You can see it rotates, that'll come right off. So again, if you're building this into a race bike, if you're putting aftermarket clip-ons, you're not gonna have this positioning screw here, because you might want, like I always like my bars to be way out, almost like I'm riding a dirt bike. So you won't have this positioner here. And a lot of times on a race bike, I know on the Ninja, it's a bit tricky because of the way the bodywork is. But on my R3, I have the handlebar, I actually took it from the top of this here, this is called the triple clamp, and moved it to the bottom so you're in a more aggressive position. This being a beginner motorcycle, they want you to be a little bit more comfortable, so that's why the clip-ons are up here on top. It's just a more comfortable riding position. So we got that off. All we have to do is take off our brake lever here, and that is a 5mm hex. Let's slide this back down so we can apply some torque. There we go. Loose and loose. That was a little loose to begin with, but that might be because the bar was bent. All right, now with this, with most of these, you'll notice there is a marking on there. It says up. Just make sure when you put it back together, you get that in the right spot. We'll just set this aside, pop this out. We've got the new one. So, I'll take the screw out. Old bent, new one. And the nice thing about this, I wasn't sure ahead of time, sometimes these, this is where the handlebar weight goes in. You can see it's threaded in there. Sometimes this is a separate piece that is plastic and you have to pull out. That's a big pain in the butt, but thankfully on this one, we don't have to. OE parts for these, so this was, you bought this brand new, right? Not from eBay?
Yep.
Yeah, so OE parts for these bikes, for the Ninja 400, the R3 and everything, are actually way cheaper than people think they are. And so a lot of times you'll check eBay and look at the price there, and if you were to go into like a Partzilla or something online, the price you pay there might actually be very similar to the eBay used part price. Like for example, I think the dash on my R3 was like $100, or maybe it was the brand new dash, the 2019 and up dash was like $100. And on eBay they're all going for 200. So it's worth checking just the OE part suppliers. I don't think that holds true for a lot of the bigger sport bikes. Like the R1 parts and everything else, those are expensive when they're new, and you'll find a much better deal on eBay. But for these bikes, for whatever reason, it seems like you can get a pretty good deal on brand new parts. So we've got our positioner back in, and I'm just hand tightening these for now. And our triple clamp pinch bolt is on. We're just making sure that we're flush here up against the handlebar, which we are. Now we'll take and figure out how this throttle housing goes back together, because there's a piece that came out. Maybe I'll have to Google this. Maybe I'll mount the brake first, get that out of the way. Remember, we've got our up marking on the brake lever. We'll just put this in here by hand. And we had marked the front one. Good thing we did. Yep. Rear back around here. I think I'm going to pause for a second, Google how this looks, and we'll be back. All right, so I found some pictures on Norton Motorsports. I'll throw those up in the edit. But they show this piece goes in, then both of our throttle cables come in this way. It's probably tough to see on the camera, but you'll be able to see in the pictures. And then our backing plate just will slide back over top of here. This is probably the trickiest part of this whole thing. It's just figuring out how all this stuff goes back together. But we'll see if we get it, and I'll do a little, if he'll let me, I'll do a little quick test ride afterwards, and we'll confirm everything's in the right spot. So, oh, there we go. Okay, so there was that's what the indent is for in this part of the cable guide. It slides everything in place, and then gotta get this down around by the brake lever. You just always wish you had like 3 more hands when you're doing this stuff. There we go. Something feels not quite right, so if something feels not right, just pop it back out. And there we go. Maybe. I'm probably gonna fast forward through this part in the edit. So, oh, that's what it is. Okay. So, I forgot about this because my bike is a race bike. So in here, you can see we've got this little peg, and we've got this little hole in the handlebar. That is our positioner. That's gonna show us exactly where we wanna be. So I'm getting resistance because I don't have this quite rotated correctly. And so you're just gonna take it and kind of move back and forth while haphazardly holding everything together until you get that positioning peg in the right spot. There you go, and you'll feel it click into place, and everything's gonna look tidy then. And I'll put back together. So you're gonna grab your 2 screws. Again, remember, JIS, not Phillips, and just get that first one kind of hand tight. Just enough to hold the housing in place so you don't have to keep worrying that you're gonna fall out of that detent. And this does not, it's plastic housing, so you don't have to crank down on this. You just want it tight enough that it's not gonna back itself out. There we go. Okay, and we have to do 2 more things. we have to put the weight back. We have to actually tighten this up, and 3 things. Get your throttle adjustment done. So you can feel we've got that coming back nicely. Let's see if we can get a little bit of free play in there. There we go. So you see how the throttle moves just a couple millimeters like this? You can't feel it obviously, but before it actually grabs and starts opening, there's just like a couple millimeters of free play. And you want that little dead zone, so that when you first go to get it on the gas, you have like a little bit of dead space. And also because this bike turns, right? The handlebars turn here, they turn back and forth. And if you don't have that dead zone in there, then if your handlebars turn to the side, that can put tension on your throttle cable and cause it to open. And then you're actually going to be, if you're in a situation where your handlebars are moving, you could also be opening the throttle, and that's potentially dangerous. So you definitely don't want that. So we will tighten all of our bolts up, make sure we go through and check everything that we've taken off. We should have room here now on our pinch bolt. And I'm sure there's a torque spec for this, but if there is, use a torque wrench. I've been doing this long enough that I can kind of feel roughly where it should be. So, and then we'll tighten our positioning bolt. Again, tight, but you don't want to crank on it. And our brake lever. So I always like to sit on the bike to figure out where this should go. And then you can do 2 things. One, you look at your clutch lever and see where that is. But the other thing I do is I take my arm and I'm in my riding position, and I kind of just put my fingers so that they're straight in line with my arm. So you can see they're all the way straight up there. And then that is where I like my lever to be. So straight in line with my arm when I'm seated. And again, you make sure you got the side that says up, up, and we're good. All we have to do is get some Loctite, put our bar weight on there, and we are good to go. So you can see there's a little bit of rust in here. I think this is from where the bar touched the ground. You could touch that up with paint, or you could just put it on the bottom so then nobody sees it. And that's good enough. Line it up. Put this in. Free frame the throttle, and we'll turn it on. Make sure she fires up. It's got that couple millimeters of dead zone before it starts going up. I think we're good. Easy peasy. Don't forget to like and subscribe.